Good morning, good evening to you, party people, beautiful friends, cousins. Boom, chicka, 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 boom. I've commented on this before. I understand I accept full responsibility. I probably am kind of annoying to wake up to. As like the other person. Although in previous dynamics, like when I've cohabitated, I've tried to work out other dynamics. But it would also be really cool to find like a morning person. Maybe the last unicorn. I don't know. I digress. Um, Sorry if this is like too wapa, but I got stuff to do today. I've got a really busy weekend, and but I wanted to carve out some time. Because yeah, probably. Apparently, I'm like the worst kind of freaking narcissist. What I have to say matters. It's important. Yada yada. I don't know if we've ever unpacked this, and perhaps we will at some point. But everything is a spectrum. Okay, narcissism, anger, control issues, everything. We need to. Okay, gosh, look at me. I'm not. We need to just keep breathing. That's what we need to do. We need to eat. We need to nourish ourselves. We're here. I find it is incredibly helpful when son of a motherless goat. I lost my train of thought. Um, just the whole point of this is mindfulness, just intention, just the spectrum. I guess I'm not gonna necessarily get back to saying exactly what I was gonna say. Man, that's my ego. See, I am a freaking narcissist. I had the perfect thing to say, and darn it, let me keep trying to sit with that thought. That was a huge thing for me. So I struggle with my words, and you'd be like, "What are you talking about, lady?" Go back if you're so inclined and listen to some videos if you want. I often will misspeak, like literally, like I will say the opposite word of my meaning. But because I can piece the other languages together, or the other languages, wow, other word choices in my sentence structure and composition, it communicates and it conveys the point. I studied communication. And it's funny because I, I continue to. God, what don't I study? I'm just a dork and a nerd. I would never claim to be expert or authority of anything, though lots of people would try and tell you otherwise. I'm expert of me, okay? Me. That's it. That's it. Um, so I have such a respect for language, but because I understand and also being like a person of like philosophy and just the other humanities as well, I understand how intangible it is, if that makes sense. And I understand that sounds illogical, but everything only has the power that it has because we give it that. I.e., we've talked about lighter. This color that we know is black. If all of a sudden I just referred to this as torque. No, torque's the word that's already used. I got a plank. I don't think there's a word called plank. So if literally moving forward, my battery charge plank. This is plank. Do 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 do. This is a plank phone. If I were to do this, eventually it could catch on. And here's the crazy part: is that even though you would still be like, no, it's black, because I do that, you then even identify it as plank, just to be like, but it's black. And this, a la Christopher Nolan, Inception, what have you. It's been such a weird journey for me because I have oftentimes been like viewed as like just even controlling or stubborn. Everything has to be my way for me. Um, because as I've even just like begun practicing, I've been practicing Buddhist for about 8 years now, um, amongst other things, and it's made me a much better Christian, to be completely honest with you. But just mindfulness and intention. And for a while, I was definitely guilty of it. This separatism, just even in observing, like, well, these people aren't mindful. Look at how inconsiderate they are. Nope, not going to be near them. and even like feeling the need to speak on it and why this is the case, etc. And I do sometimes. Let's not act like I'm not going to potentially come on or like I haven't done that already in potentially sharing strong reviews. But that's just it. Everything's a spectrum. And I guess that might actually be why I come on, because I do want to make sure that all aspects can be as thoroughly represented, because I am a true advocate of embracing and integrating all aspects of yourself, a la Jung. Although I think he had some misogynistic issues, and I think that I think most of society has had deep seated, deep rooted misogyny toward women, and we can't necessarily mean to. It's not like an overt hatred, but it is just a very clear lack and disrespect of the fact that we are all only here because of women. And yeah, just point blank period. I'm gonna take a moment to honor that in and of itself. We are all here because of women. And as a mother, um, I sometimes feel it can be one of the most thankless jobs in the entire world. And but I don't want to get too excited on that because I'm fortunate. I've got some great kids. The experience, while incredibly challenging for me and very difficult at times, is without a doubt the most rewarding thing. And I even tell my children, you guys have probably saved my life. Who knows if I would have gone all Che Guevara, just what kind of shenanigans I might have been on if I would have had more time and energy to kind of expel to all of the things that just interest me and fascinate me. But yeah, just I wanted to take a moment because just the spectrum, everything is a spectrum, and I just and maybe I'm the negative one, so just even owning that. So I want to be clear. You've seen me smoke a few times. I'm about to smoke right here too. Plant medicines are fantastic. Mullein is really, really good this time of year. It's good in tea and whatnot. But as someone with inflammation issues, um, sage, and again, talk to your doctor and physician if you see one, folks. I'm not giving you medical advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Nobody come sue me because I've already explained to you. If I were to ever come into means, it's honestly probably so I could benefit you all, so I could travel, buy random strangers coffees and stuff. And I do this, and not to toot my own horn anyway, so you know why I'm poor. I'm not. I will never forget. I'm very, very fortunate. Um, I have experienced both incredible means, and then I have experienced thin living. Um, and so, as I said, I'm not incredibly money motivated. I don't know if it's having native ancestry. I don't know if it's having a soul and imagination. Not that I'm saying anybody's soulless, but the spectrum. Just I'm easily entertained as long as my needs are met. I'm usually really good. And it's funny because I've had certain, dynamics in the past where people have where they've contributed more fiscally, if that makes sense, to our dynamics, especially because, I'm a parent, I have children, and don't always have access to as much disposable income. And that's one, again, we talk about women, and I didn't want to go too sideways because the spectrum, but that is one that I guess we will visit right now, and I do want to sit with. Man, I want to challenge you in this belief. And truly, how are women gold diggers when we don't get paid as much as you? This is like a factual truth. There is pay disparity. And let's go further, okay? We have a menstrual cycle, okay? It's called pink tax. We have to pay for care items that we need, which is depleting into our resources more. But let's go even further. And sure, you can look at things like razors, and some, women have made the choice, if we choose to groom and whatnot, that certain products, the price points that men's products actually typically cost less than women's do. So, and some women can't necessarily, alternate. So, for example, sometimes I like using men's deodorant, because of my sensitivities in my health. I specifically have to use like natural and aluminum free, just all sorts of chemical free, and I should be careful because I can definitely get rashes, just even depending on. It's ironic, right? But again, incorporating different plants and herbs. There's some chamomile and heal for inflammation. Um, so it isn't necessarily your typical, you know, pure, just straight tobacco cigarette. Wild lettuce, like there is plant medicine in this. Um, so varying types of plant medicine. Right off the bat, women have a bit of a disadvantage. And so, to be clear, I do think that people should take care of each other, but I think very specifically to a very, very hurtful dynamic that I once experienced when I was accused of actually only being with someone for the means that they could supply, when from my point of view, it was actually like, are you serious right now? You were so dishonest about so many things that affected me in the beginning, i.e., your own health issues, not potentially being as open about them. And I get it, you don't want to trauma dump, but huge things. Um, at one point, I helped this person kind of create a business. And to be fair, it was their own assets, but they were not really doing anything with them, kind of help them change and transmute the energy. And so then, they started doing things like they got me a Spotify. They started paying for my Spotify. And I will never forget, in having a disagreement and we decided to possibly take some space, they canceled the Spotify. And I just happened to mention it, and I wanted to unpack and have a dialogue that it was actually very telling and indicative that, were we taking a break, or were we actually just ending things, perhaps? And then it became about how it was about money and whatnot. And I remember thinking, I mean, technically speaking, like, I'd gotten this person supplies for their business. I'd actually often offered, even like, hey, do you want me to help you? Blah, blah, blah. This, it infringed into our time. Um, and it actually, in my observations, showed to a lack of generousness of spirit. Punishment, control, i.e., you're not happy with me, bad dog, I'm going to punish you. And it was very, very hurtful, especially because in a dynamic with another person outside of that, it was like completely different. Like, it's funny, just again, people, because certain people that I've been connected with in similar types of dynamics, they've been like, one of my favorite things about you is the fact that, you contribute just as much. Like, i.e., with this person, if we would go on vacation, the previous person maybe would get like an Airbnb, and I would contribute by wanting to get food and, like, maybe provide some of the entertainment. There, it would just maybe not necessarily be exactly 50-50. And it was interesting because, especially in other dynamics, like, I there have been instances, because it's not like I have been more of the breadwinner in certain instances, if that makes sense, and I have definitely been the recipient on certain ends of it. But I do want to speak to this specifically because I think a lot of times that there is this whole thing that, women are gold digging, and I don't believe that's possible. But again, also, to be clear, I'm not, like, I am incredibly self-sufficient, if that makes sense. I haven't necessarily ever been able to be taken care of and trust taken care of, because essentially people that have offered to, essentially, in a lot of dynamics, in most of the dynamics in my life, anyone that has ever offered care has eventually tried to use that as a means of, like, control, or, I do this for you, so you should this. That is not love. And as I see it, and that's part, I think, of the issues with a lot of my, again, spectrum. It's on the spectrum of love. Yes, you loved me, but is that the most healthy love? Because again, I need to be clear. I do speak in these absolutes, and hopefully I sort of spoke to that earlier. Funnily enough, it's kind of, they're transposed in my mind because I started a video, and then because I got so kind of wonky with my words, and then in a comment was gonna kind of out something more without allowing plausible deniability. And so I rewound, or I shouldn't say rewound because it's not like a tape, but I started recording again. Everything is a spectrum. So yes, I misspoke on that one, and I want to be accountable. I was loved. That's not the kind of love that I want. That's not the kind of friendship. And I will have to unpack as to how that is something I've also had to work on. So gift giving, acts of service. These are two words of affirmation. I would honestly say all of my love languages. I incorporate all of them, if you will, and then some. And that used to be one for me. Like if people wouldn't necessarily say thank you, or if people didn't reciprocate, because that is one of these narratives we pros. Like don't water cups that don't water yours. And while that's true, I would lovingly call everybody in to remember we have different skill sets. So what if they don't necessarily match your energies in a particular way? I.e. my life partner, we are very similar in certain ways, but we are very different. I.e. just some of our musical tastes. There is one particular artist that just I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me. I'm just a demon manipulating all this. I don't. I don't. Actually, there are two, because I'm not a fan of Bowie at all. Say what you will, I don't care. Being 25 and having sex with teenagers is not cool. I don't care if it was a sign of the times. That's gross. And to never speak it. Let me just keep going, because there's also another big old band. Everyone's like, oh, the White Witch. And everyone just idolizes their big breakup and how they were all sleeping around with each other. Also gross. I'm seeing a trend as to why I think most media is just gross. It's one thing to accept our human nature, but I feel like that is one of my struggles. We are all spiritual. A lot of people say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. These words now make me run, because they used to be such an attraction for me. Like, you're spiritual, I'm spiritual, yay! So you're acknowledging your Holy Spirit. You are striving to feel empowered. You recognize your light. You're aware of it. You recognize your shadow. So you're interplaying the dynamics, and you're cultivating them, and you're learning to master and integrate both, eh? Cool! If you can't tell, no. No. No! That has not necessarily been the case. Maybe that's me gaslighting and gatekeeping, what spirituality is to me. But as I've said, in so many, like our media, the way that we are going about essentially just coping with things, that's why I'm posting. It's a different way, man. I admit it. Just thinking, feeling. I go and do weird things. I hike at 3 o'clock in the morning. I go and talk to animals. I go and I do weird prayer meditations. I'm learning the guitar so that I could just go sit at parks and play and not busk. It's honestly, it's interesting. I think I mentioned that, like, I'm a habitual, like, stay in my own laner, and yet I am such an acts of service person. And it's very interesting, being a person like therapy and whatnot. I've had to sit with this just in my, like, is this like some weird hero complex, like save the world, etc. And it could be, to be very honest with you, it could be because I am an INFJ and I have external feeling, and it would be great if there was just more harmony and people had ways to just sort of breathe through things and be more level. But because that isn't necessarily the case, I sometimes like I can't help it. I.e., like if someone's like rubbing their shoulder and they're taking a moment like wincing in pain, I don't look away. I don't look away if someone's crying. Like, and I do. I believe that we can always be of benefit, and I think people do. I think that is our nature, which is why I sit with it and I struggle with it because again, a spectrum. Everything that I don't like, even these things, these concepts, these representations, they aren't the worst. They aren't the be all end all. But it is more of the lack of accountability, more of the continued one side positive narrative. It is imbalanced. Imbalanced is not natural, it's not healthy. And we wonder why we have these things like depression and whatnot. Well, we are giving away our power and our agency. We are quite literally choosing to say these things are admirable, these things are aspirations. Why? It's funny. I've mentioned that I'm a parent, and I do love the fact that my co-parent is very much of this earth in the ways that I am not. And something that I was talking to my children about. So like monarchy, okay? Just run with me for a minute. We look at things like clinical disorder and what have you. And if I were to tell you all that God ordained me to rule because I have faced challenges, because I have been declared dead at times and been revived more than once. And once you unpack my story more, and I don't believe this, also to be clear, but we'd probably all be campaigning to potentially have me institutionalized. And yet with monarchy, because of like the lineages, that's essentially how kings and queens were chosen. Because of their victories at battle, etc. I think of, in Tudor history even, I think it was Edward V. And when he ended up becoming king, just his brothers on the battlefield with him, and astrological events would come into play and they'd be notated, like i.e. an eclipse. And then so again, that was God, that was the heavens speaking and saying that this person, was just another sign. And so it went further. And it even got into money. And I mean no disrespect to anyone. Money it's a tool. It makes things easier if you have it. But this is what I mentioned earlier, like, having come from money, but then also having survived through very lean times. And we're all going through leaner times right now, in all honesty. But I find even that, like, money can oftentimes it's only used as a tool for, like, distractionary, for, like, a lack of a personality, honestly, like boredom. Spotify is a great example. That you would have to pay to go adless. Like, that inability to not be able to scroll repeatedly, that inability to sit through the ads for, I almost went full British for a minute. The adverts, and I'll just leave it at that. Advertisements, I almost did. Oh no, my battery's about to die. So the spectrum, just loving Colin, it just rocked me. Oh, at the beginning of this, I'm not even gonna reference that anymore. It doesn't even matter. Everything is a spectrum. And everything really is okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be in your feelings. I'll talk about a different comment post, boundaries, etc. As someone who's very big on boundaries, I just keep seeing these like bitter, cynical memes. Like, give somebody one chance exactly. They know who they are. The second time it's a pattern and blah, blah, blah. And I'm definitely a person who has like advocated and been like, look, you have to believe people's patterns, not their behavior. Not just their words per se. And funnily enough, that's even how I will adjust based on patterns. But I guess I wanted to specifically speak to the tail end of that, which is that, but don't ever necessarily write anyone off. Because me using, like, I used to be very capital punishment, and nowadays, absolutely not. In fact, funnily enough, I can't help but see the potential knowledge that could be gleaned. Now, again, I don't think certain people, once, their proclivities have been outed, should be free range chickens, so to speak. But who better as a society, than us as knowing that a murderer is a murderer and having them, not to sound all like Auschwitz, but like tattooed or, collared or something, for us to know, like, all right, I know what you're capable of. You don't want to be murdered? Don't be murdered. And a lot of people would say, well, maybe I don't necessarily want to have to take a life. Don't. Surround yourself with people that are committed to not letting other people get murdered. Doesn't always necessarily even have to be policing systems, etc. I think about that a lot, just our power and our agency. Wife beaters. Who better to actually stop a wife beater than the neighbors who see him smiling to everybody's face, but hear him at night screaming at her, calling her names, etc. So just as a loving call and a loving reminder, I'm always going to speak to not necessarily polarizing. Like, yes, of course, do what you need to do. I can't walk in your shoes. I don't have to journey beside you. Well, I don't. I'd be more than happy to. We're here. I'm trying to in my own ways even now. You don't have to accept the company. That's beautiful, right? In the most loving way possible, in fact. So, just that being said, you owe it to yourself to keep in mind nothing is one-sided, ever. Nothing is what we are perceiving it just because we're perceiving it that way. It is part of it. It's a big part of it. But everything goes deeper. So, open minds, open hearts, how we change the world. And I I get it. Sometimes, especially like tone can be implied, etc. In honoring that, the 21 Taras, it can't always come off butterflies and rainbows. But that doesn't mean that it isn't always coming from a place of love and compassion and discernment. And more importantly, an ability to incorporate and, adapt and co-create accordingly. So, loving you this day and always, and keep on keeping on. You are fabulous. You are fantastic. And you're changing the world. Let's do it. Mwah!